Welcome back, everyone, to Four Eyes, the podcast series that gives you a clear view into the optometry world across Canada and the U.S. Today, we had the pleasure of speaking with Dr. Harbir Sian. He's an optometrist from Vancouver, BC, who has taken over the optometry world through social media. He's had a YouTube channel for about 6 years now, making videos for patient education. He's written many blogs and articles on various optometry-related topics, and he has a huge presence on social media. And now he's also the host of his own podcast, the 2020 Podcast. This interview was recorded over Zoom, so apologies in advance for any audio lag or any distorted sounds. We just hope that you enjoyed the interview and learn just as much as we did. So enjoy. So, we already know a lot about you. You have like a really, really big presence on all different forms of social media and just in the optometry community in general. But just in case if there are any of our listeners who don't know anything about you, would you like to give us just a little brief introduction of who you are?
Yeah, for sure. Thank you, Amrit. I'm sure there's plenty of people who don't actually know who I am, but I appreciate you're giving me that kind of a reputation already. But my name is Dr. Harbir Sian. I'm an optometrist in the Vancouver area. I'm a co-owner of two practices, one in Surrey, BC, one in Abbotsford. As you said, I'm very active online. One of the things that I have loved to do from day one is to look for ways to be engaging and involved outside of the office. And so back in 2010, when I graduated, that started with writing blogs, then it evolved to making YouTube videos and volunteering in mobile clinics or volunteer clinics, volunteering within our association and all sorts of other things. And so all of those opportunities have kind of led me to where I am now. I have my own podcast and all these things. It's been a really fun journey, and I'm just always looking for something new and exciting to not only better myself, but also help at the same time advocate for our profession and help it grow.
Yeah, we initially wanted to bring you onto our podcast because we know that you graduated from NECO, but now you're practicing in Canada. So we wanted to know, how did you handle that transition from learning US related optometry and then going into working in Canada? Like, what kind of resources did you use to really help you navigate through the Canadian aspects of optometry?
Yeah, I've always been, the way that I like to learn is by having conversations with people. So I've never been very good at like the textbook stuff. That's just, I love studying in groups and absorbing from other people and that kind of stuff and sharing information. So that's how I approached coming back home as well. So in my fourth year, I structured my rotation so that my last rotation was here in Vancouver. And in that last 3 months or so, plus the summer time when I wasn't actually working, I was waiting for the licensing and everything else, I just spent that time calling ODs around the area and talking to them. And that's something, a piece of information that I would strongly recommend, and this would maybe require some people breaking out of their comfort zone a bit, but one thing that has served me really well all these years, even today, is be comfortable cold calling people. I literally called people that I'd never met before, and I just said, "Hey, I'm a new optometrist. I'm graduating in a couple of months. A, do you have a job for me? B, do you have any advice for me? And C, do you have somebody else I can talk to if you think that there might be somebody valuable I could speak to?" And that was it. I spoke to, a dozen different optometrists. You know what? The way I started working is maybe not the way a lot of people want to, but I ended up working at 4 different clinics, just 1 or 2 days at each clinic, and just sort of, one was, it was hard to find a job that was going to be the steady 5 days a week, which I think we all kind of want initially. But the other thing is, I realized quickly there's a lot of value in working at a couple of different places. One, it keeps it fresh, but also you get to learn from different people in different settings. But sorry, I'm going off on a bit of a tangent. To answer your question, really the way I approached it was by talking to other people who were already established or who had maybe just gone through it. Maybe they graduated a year or two ahead of me. I was going to come back to BC anyway. Obviously, I never personally intended to do a residency. Obviously, nothing against doing residencies. There's massive value in doing it, but that was just not my path. So I knew the way I wanted to practice. I called the optometrists who were practicing the way I wanted to practice, and I just took as much advice as I could.
That's awesome. I feel like that's basically what we're doing with this podcast platform too, is we're just reaching out to a lot of ODs who we've never met before, and we're getting out of our comfort zone to just ask the questions and make connections and learn more from other experienced ODs, because we still don't know what we're doing. So
pretty much.
It's okay, neither do I. So you'll always be learning. And that's the best way to learn, is by talking to somebody who's already done it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
When you were in optometry school, did you always know that you were going to be in private practice, or did you think you were going to go into more industry stuff, or what did you think during optometry school?
Yeah, I don't know where the idea came from, but the goal from day one was private practice. Like, I'm not going to do residency. I'm going to go home, and as soon as I can, I'm going to open up my own practice. I don't know why it was such a solid thought in my mind that there was like no wavering from it. The interesting thing was that the ODs that I got in touch with when I came back, and in fact, the guy who was sort of my original mentor here in Vancouver, the OD that I kind of give credit to for me going into optometry is Dr. Amrit Pawa. So if this ever gets back to him, I love you, Dr. Pawa. Anybody who knows him, he's been practicing for many years now. Everybody loves the guy. But Dr. Pawa and a few of the associates at his office, they're all in a sublease next door to LensCrafters. He was the first person I contacted when I wanted to come back home, and then he put me in touch with his friends and colleagues who were also in sublease practices. And so that's actually where I ended up to begin with, was next door to LensCrafters. Not what I had envisioned when I was in school, but the general concept was still there of me owning my own practice, but it was just a sublease practice versus an independent. There's very limited opportunities here. I think in other provinces it's different. In the US, for sure, it's very, very different. But here there's very, very few new sublease practices opening up. And that's it. So out here, opportunities for that are pretty limited. So I felt pretty honored that they approached me, because I had kind of made my name within that little circle. But again, the goal was still private practice, independent private practice. And so just a couple of years ago, we had the opportunity, my business partner and I, to start had a cold start in Surrey. And I see where people come. You guys have probably heard the conversation around private practice versus corporate optometry. And a lot of people are very vocal about it. I'm obviously have one foot in each. So I'm happy to talk about both, but I don't think it's appropriate for personally the people who are in private practice looking down on people who are in corporate, because we have a corporate setting and we practice almost the exact same way, literally. The only thing, obviously, I don't want to downplay it. The only thing we don't do is dispense, and dispensing comes with a lot of its own challenges. But practicing as an optometrist, it feels exactly the same to me. When I'm in the exam room with a patient, I recommend all the exact same things. So day one, my goal was always to have a practice, and that's the way I approached it right when I came home. But everybody's got their own path. So if you're not sure, I'm going to go back to what I first said. Call other ODs and talk to them and see what you think fits best for you. And I think you'll find whatever's right.
Nice,
yeah.
Sorry, I give really long-worded answers. I hope you don't mind.
Perfect.
Yeah. One word answer where you're like, yes. And then like, okay.
Yeah, just a heads up. We're very sarcastic people who love to laugh and joke around. So don't take anything seriously.
It's okay. I felt right at home right as soon as we got on the call. You know what? Here, I'm going to show you my mug. I don't know if people are going to be watching this or just listening. Can you read that?
My dad jokes?
Yeah. So my staff bought me this. Because that's all I do is walk around. I think I'm making funny jokes, but apparently they classify as dad jokes.
Yeah. We half the time think we're making funny jokes, and then when we tell our other friends about the jokes, they're like, "That's what you're talking about." But we're like,
listen, as long as you find it funny, it was worth it.
Yeah. I don't know. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So kind of going back to like you opening your private practice, and you said you have a business partner. What kind of like qualities did you look for in a business partner, and like how exactly did you find your partner?
So actually, my business partner and I have been friends since high school.
Oh.
So it's a very unique situation that I don't expect most people to have the luxury of being in. So the number one thing I'm going to say, and this is maybe specific to me, is I needed somebody who was extremely tolerant. She's known me for 25 years, which is crazy to think now. And so she knows a lot of my flaws. And majority of my flaws are that I'm a procrastinator. I tend to be quite lazy. And I just do things at my own pace, which is not often the pace that a lot of other people want to go at. And Harleen is very, very meticulous, diligent, organized. So she's almost the opposite of me in that sense. So I almost actually would say it's valuable to find, and I think you probably heard the cliche is like find somebody who has strengths where you have your weaknesses and vice versa, you kind of balance. And so I think that's kind of what we actually have. But I needed somebody who was very tolerant of my the way that I work. Finding somebody where you kind of have a balance. Again, it's unlikely that your business partner is going to have been your friend since you were in high school.
Yeah.
But the number one thing you need, aside from a tolerant person, is somebody you can trust, right? And that trust will be built through different experiences and obviously over time. And there will be tough situations. There's, as much as we try, it just is so hard when you're doing a business. It's impossible to avoid difficult times. And that's where the tolerance comes in. It's literally like a marriage. I have a work wife and a home wife, and you go through similar kinds of ups and downs in a business relationship as you do in a home relationship. So you need to be able to put up with the person. So that's kind of where I'd go. Number one, I'll rearrange my list here. Trust, number one. Number two, somebody who's tolerant and understands your personality. And then somebody who does actually balance out your strengths and weaknesses.
Yeah, nice. That's perfect. I feel like that kind of applies to how we all decided to do a podcast together too. There's 4 personalities, so there's definitely a different dynamic, different opinions. And so we've all given responsibilities to each other based on everyone's strengths, so that the work is still split evenly and no one is stepping on each other's toes and things like that. So that what you said, I feel like was perfect.
Yeah, thanks. No, that's great that you guys have the awareness to do that, because that's part of the reason why I tend to do a lot of the stuff I do on my own, is because I don't think I'm particularly good at delegating. And so I just, other than work-wise, at work, when I'm in the office, I feel like I have more of a grasp on, I know who to give the tasks to. You have to when you're the owner and managing the staff. But when it comes to things like a podcast or other things that I'm doing, I tend to just do them on my own, because I don't think I would have the ability like you guys have to split the tasks up appropriately. So good for you guys.
Yeah, thanks. And actually, kind of adding on to that, finding a business partner. So when you're opening up your optometry practice, who else should you be looking for to hire onto your team? Such as, what kind of lawyers do you need, or brokers or staff? Who do you need to hire to properly get that paperwork done, or any other process of opening up the practice? And how long does that process take?
A long time. Or I should say longer than you expect or plan for it to be, for sure. Like any friend, colleague, business, anybody else I've spoken to in business, it always takes longer than you expect, even when you put a buffer period in there. And that's the frustrating part about doing a business, especially a cold start, when you have to literally build out the unit. So you got to hire contractors and stuff like that. But you hit on a couple of the top ones, right? So you absolutely need to have a lawyer. You need to have an accountant. And those are the two that we see. The accountant is the one that we talk to very, very regularly, pretty much weekly in some shape or form, especially now with all these things going on, and we got to figure out who's paying whom and how much and whatever. The lawyer is vital in the beginning stages, because you'll be signing lots of contracts and leases and all these things. Depending on how you're approaching it, you likely will need some form of a realtor or somebody who has some kind of expertise in the real estate market. Now, we sort of bypass that because we found our unit sort of through a friend who knew the landlord. And so but we still had to bring the documents to our lawyer and other people in between. And then when it comes to the construction side of things, you'll have to find a contractor, somebody who's actually able to build out the unit for you and hire all the tradespeople. And that is a headache, a massive headache. Well, it was for us anyway. And, one thing I'll say, I'm not sure if this is on the same line as what you're thinking for the question, but you will want to, for sure, I think, in my opinion, align yourself with a group, a buying group or something along those lines. When it's coming around time to open, you're 6 months out from opening or a few months out from opening, you want to have you nail down a buying group that you want to be part of. Now, you could do it alone, but it's just so much harder these days with corporate, with online, with most other private practices being part of a buying group. Is very difficult to get the same rates as everybody else. And it goes beyond like just getting cheaper rates on frames and things like that. Most of these buying groups are really adding a lot of other value. So for example, our private practice is part of a group called Independent Alliance, which is under the umbrella of FYI doctors. You guys are probably familiar with FYI doctors. So FYI is huge. And IA is a small piece of that, but it's their independent practice sort of arm. So we do everything ourselves. We have benefit from the resources of FYI, like the lab and their online resources and the discounts, but we don't have to adhere to their corporate structure for their stores. So there's kind of like a best of both worlds, if you will. But it's very, very, very valuable to make sure you are looking into. So if you're in Canada, we're talking OSI, I recommend FYI, although you wouldn't go to FYI as a brand new practice, you'd probably look into Independent Alliance. In the US, Vision Source, Healthy Eyes Advantage, and a couple others. My Eye Doctor community, and I have a couple of friends who are part of that. So lawyer first, lawyer and accountant at the same time first. When you're starting anything up, because you're going to have lots of documents that need to be signed and read over. And then you're going to be looking at, if you're building a practice out, contractors, realtors, if you're looking to scout out a location, and then look into the buying groups.
So for the lawyer, does it kind of depend on what lawyer you hire, and how do you contact people? Or how do you find these kind of groups of people?
So again, how I started this conversation, I tend to do a lot of things by asking other people. Okay. And that's how I did it. Everything, all of these things I did by calling up somebody I know and saying, who do you use? And I'll call like 5 people. And if there happens to be an overlap or something, lines up, then I'll call someone according to that. So our lawyer is friend of a friend kind of thing. And our accountant, we spoke to a lot of our colleagues, and we went with somebody who specifically deals with healthcare professionals. And so he has experience working with physicians and dentists and whatever.
Okay. Yeah.
And, call me or message me. I'm happy to chat anytime.
Yeah.
If I can help, I'm happy to help anytime.
Oh, we will. We will. We will.
Good.
We'll just flood your inbox with
it's all good.
And we know you're a procrastinator, so we'll message you like 3 months before we're expecting to find these people, and that's when you'll respond to us.
You got it. I'll respond right away. I just might not get around to giving you the advice you're looking for. That's perfect.
So how did you decide on the location of your practice?
Okay, the sublease practice wasn't up to me. That's where they were opening a Lens Crafters, and so I just went with the opportunity. At that time, I was looking for anything I could take. For the second one, we scouted out very meticulously over a long period of time. We took a long time to decide on that one because there was so much money and effort and time that was going to go into it. We were looking for something that was going to be in an area that was not already saturated with other practices, an area that was growing. And so we would, over the next decade, have a growing patient base and a growing population in our area. And we were looking for something that there would be stuff around us to draw people in, right? So we didn't want to just have a standalone store by itself in some random area. We are in a new plaza that was built just a couple of years ago. It's right across the street from a big high school. There's a medical office, a pharmacy, a physio, dentist office, all right next door to us. So we're kind of in we have a little medical corner in the plaza. There was, unfortunately, a couple things didn't quite go as planned. There was supposed to be a big grocery store that we thought was going to be a big draw, but that didn't end up coming in. So that was a bit of a loss. But the biggest value is the population in that area is booming, and it's booming with the right demographic. So what we knew was there's a lot of townhouses and small single family homes that young people, young professionals, young families will be looking for. And that's exactly the demographic we wanted, right? So we target young families to bring their kids in, and then of course get parents to get their eye exams and that kind of thing. Although we see from newborns up to age 100, whatever. We like to just do the full scope, but we figured that's where we wanted to aim, and people who have benefits through work and that kind of stuff. And we're lucky, that worked out fairly well.
Did you ever consider possibly hiring, I don't know the professional name of these people, but the people who pretty much do like a census of like the population, so they know, how many children are in this area, if you want to do like a pediatric type of a clinic, or how many young singles are in this population? I don't know what they're called, but did you guys ever consider hiring those types of professionals to get an idea of who's going to be living in that area? Or were you already kind of familiar with that area from just living nearby?
Yeah, we never actually considered that. That sounds like it would be pretty valuable. I'm going to keep referring back to my very first answer in this interview, which is we called a lot of people.
Okay, yeah.
Connections.
Yeah, well, that's like my life story is that's how I just got things done. So we happen to know a couple people who lived in the area, and like I was saying, we scouted the area for a long time ourselves. And we were forced to do it also. To go back to maybe your previous question about who you need to bring on board, one thing I missed was you need some, somebody that works with a bank, some small business advisor or something along those lines, for sure, because you're going to need money, and you're more than likely need to take out loans unless you're fortunate to have a lot of money sitting around. It costs anywhere between $200,000 to $400,000 to build a clinic from scratch, right? And so you'll usually need to get a loan. So small business advisor, somebody who can talk you through the loan process. But when you go through that loan process, they want you to build a business plan. If you don't have one already, they'll walk you through it. They'll give you a template, or they'll ask you like 100 questions that will essentially result in you building a business plan. A batch of those questions is talking about your geographic area and the demographics in that area. So it sort of forces you to look at that. And so we just did that research ourselves.
Okay.
That's a very helpful hint right there. I feel like not a lot of people think about that kind of stuff too.
Yeah.
Yeah. Also, what's the biggest lesson you learned from opening your own clinic?
Aside from everything you've already
or like the biggest mistake you made?
Yeah, that you learned from, I guess.
Probably the biggest thing I learned, the only reason I'm hesitating is because I don't know if this is like the most valuable answer for everybody who's listening, but the biggest thing I've learned is it takes a lot of work, a lot more than I expected. And I don't mean that in a discouraging way, but I often joke, I'll say half jokingly anyway, that if I'd known how much work it was going to be, I probably wouldn't have done it. But there's value in that, right? Cliche stuff, right? And nothing in life that's worth it is going to be easy. It's a lot of work. It's not easy. I've been blessed to have a very, like I said, diligent, hardworking, organized partner. If it was just me, I'm confident I would get through it. It would have been a very meandering way of getting through it.
And you have less hair.
I already have way less hair than I did when I started. Don't even get me started on that topic.
But you can thank your partner for how much hair you have left right now.
Yeah, right. I know. There are stressful times, but at the same time, you have a lot of really cool experiences. I would encourage anybody who's going through it to be aware that it's going to be a lot of work, but get as comfortable with stressful, difficult times as you can, and try to just always look for the positive in it. Like the other kind of cliche is you either win or you learn, right? Or you win or you grow. You don't win or you lose. If you have a difficult time, your stressful time, find the silver lining, find the positive, find the thing that's going to help you learn and grow through it. And if you always look at it, and I've had to say that out loud to kind of trigger my brain to think the right way. Harleen and I will be on a call, be like, oh my God, we screwed that up. And then the next thing I'll have to say is, oh, well, we'll learn from this. All right, that was a learning experience. And when you look at it that way, all of a sudden, you kind of shed some of that, the weight that's on your shoulders. Oh, well, I learned, so I'm not going to make that mistake next time. Well, it was okay. That would probably be the number one thing is it's difficult, but if you approach it with your struggles are just learning experiences, you just keep getting through it. And you look back after, now it's been a couple of years, and we're like, whoa, we've come a long way. We're not where we want to be, but we've actually come quite a long way in just a couple of years.
Yeah. when I was going through a lot of your content, a lot of your like LinkedIn articles and your social media and things like that, I saw that there's a consistent theme that you really emphasize patient education. And in one of your LinkedIn articles, you mentioned that like knowledge is power. It's the main force that drives your patients to learn about their condition, stay compliant with their condition, and then come back to you for their follow-ups and things like that. So for anyone that's practicing, what resources do you recommend for optometrists to use in their office for patient education?
First of all, thanks you did your homework. That's cool. And that you found a common theme in all of my haphazard posts.
I have a lot of free time.
That's great.
A lot of free time.
But you're right though. If there was going to be a common theme, that for sure would be it. Like I'm so passionate about education just across the board. My wife always tells me like I probably should have been a teacher, but I tell her there's no chance I would have had patience with students. Like a lot of the education I'm doing is just me talking to like somebody out there, right? It's a lot easier. More recently, in the last 12 to whatever, let's say a year or so, my focus has actually turned inward towards our profession and to other ODs, right? So trying to share as much information as I can with our colleagues to see if I can help others, whether it's students or new grads, whoever, to just be better and maybe avoid some of the mistakes that I've made. But as far as being a resource, what resource is best for your patients? I think you, the practitioner, are the best resource and should be, for multiple reasons. One is they come to you for their eye care and they want to trust that you know. I mean, you're not going to know everything, obviously, but they want to know that you know a lot about what you're doing, right? You're checking their eyes. They want to know that you are very proficient in that. So when you educate them yourself and you enlighten them on things that they didn't know about before, they come away feeling a lot more comfortable and confident about the person they're seeing. But it also, you guys probably know that I talk a lot about like building a brand. That is a form of building your brand with your patient and with your patient base as a whole. You want to be known as the guy or girl that knows stuff and is willing to take the time to educate your patients. And so I think you, the individual person in front of your patient, should be the ultimate resource, that you should be the first person that they think of when it's something with their eyes. It's extremely rewarding when somebody emails and says, I need to talk to Dr. Sian. I have a question for him specifically, right? And it's not like, oh, I'm looking for an optometrist. Can somebody answer my question? And that is obviously it's if it's a person that I've seen before, it's very rewarding. It's nice to know that they trust me enough to come back. But it could be a completely random person I've never met before that's scouted me out online and felt that they saw enough of my personality or whatever it is that they felt comfortable calling our office out of the blue. So again, you, the individual, should be comfortable taking the time to educate your patient. Now, what resources can you use to supplement yourself? I use a lot of photos, just generic stuff. Like, so we've gone through a process recently of trying to implement a dry eye clinic within our practice. And so I was lucky to test out a few different things. And I even got, medical equipment company reach out to me and lent me a slit lamp, a very fancy digital slit lamp that let me do live, imaging and videos and stuff like that. And that was really valuable, but I felt like it was more fun for me than it was for the patient.
Yeah.
I just show them pictures. Like I'll be like, hey, this is what a normal eyelid looks like. This is what MGD looks like. You're closer to this picture. Let's do something about it. Or, one resource that's been kind of fun is we have a simulator by a company called ViewCare. It's called View Simulator. And that's kind of cool because it's like a sliding scale of like, you can show them like a simulation of a certain condition. But like, honestly, nothing too fancy personally, right? So I just think you as the person have to be the ultimate resource for your patient. And you can supplement it with other stuff. That's fine. But I'm not outsourcing my education to somewhere else because then they won't come back to me for stuff.
Yeah. I actually want to add on top of what you just mentioned in that answer. You said that, your brand is something that's really important as a healthcare professional. What are just like your top 5 tips for someone that wants to build their brand as a healthcare professional?
Sure. you're referring to social media, or just kind of social media and
social media, but also I think just you yourself as a healthcare professional, like you have your patients always coming back to you because you have your own personality. I consider a personality as a brand as well, because it's representing you on top of, you know, everything else that you have. What are some tips for ODs out there to just build their brand or their personality as a healthcare professional to bring those patients back to them, I guess?
Right.
Also make themselves known to like other ODs as well, right? So like kind of like exactly what you're doing.
Yeah, thanks. I look at you know, a brand is essentially like your reputation, right? But we have so many new resources now. You know, the saying goes, your reputation can precede you, right? So your brand is like, what do people think when they hear your name or see your face? And that's what I consider to be your personal brand.
Yeah.
So the number one thing that I say across the board, whether you're on social media or you're in front of a patient or you're having a conversation with anybody, is that you want to make sure that you are providing value to that conversation. You could take away a lot from the other person, but ultimately, and I don't mean that in a negative way. I mean, like, you have a mutual exchange of ideas and things like that. But the first thing you want to do when you approach any experience, any engagement, is to make sure you're providing value to the other person. So on social media, that's easy. When you put a post up, think about how it's going to help somebody else. Don't post something, I mean, you could, that's fine, but don't post something that's just purely vain and you just like the way you look in it, right? Try to add some value and have that same perspective when you're having an in-person conversation. And I think that's even more important when you're talking to your patients. You want your patients to leave feeling like they got a lot of value, more value than what they paid for. So that's number one, provide value. Number two, in general, again, social media or in person, try to engage with people, right? And that means kind of breaking out of your comfort zone a little bit. Go out of your way to have a conversation with people. And that means cold calling. That means walking up to somebody in a room that you think is, you know, somebody you admire, or maybe you look up to, or you've heard about, you want to learn more from. And then the third thing is to be very consistent with who you are, right? And that, again, social media or in person. If you want to be an educator, you want to help other people, then try to do that across the board. Don't just pick and choose who you do that with. Try and do that with everybody, because that's how you're going to build your reputation. When somebody else talks to someone else, person X talks to person Y about you, and they say the same positive thing to each other, then you've built a brand.
Yeah.
So I know we kind of already touched on this, like how you're on basically every social media platform except for TikTok, I think. I don't know if you're but you're also really involved in the community. You're a board director for the Eyeglasses Project, right?
Correct, yeah.
So can you talk a little bit about that and how other ODs practicing in other cities can get involved with that if they can?
Yeah. First of all, I have a TikTok account.
Oh, okay.
I have just never...
We didn't do enough research.
Yeah, I know.
Okay, you wouldn't have found it because I've never used it actually. And now we're sitting at home, and all you see on people's feeds is like TikTok accounts, husbands and wives and kids dancing.
Yeah.
So my wife's like, I made fun of it in my lecture. I can't do it now.
Yeah.
But you know what? Don't be surprised if you see something from me on TikTok. It's just, I'm going to be very careful about exactly what it is that I put out there. But right now, anyway, this can change. I don't foresee TikTok being that valuable for healthcare providers in the way that I'm trying to use. If you're just trying to gain followers in random places who want to see you dancing, all good, do it. Like if you're an optometrist and you love dancing or you love playing music, go ahead, do it. That's great. But one of the things that, you know, if you're trying to have a presence online is you want to be kind of clear about what your mission is. And mine is to help other people. And so by dancing and singing, it probably won't be all that valuable. But on that, sorry, I'm going to answer your question in just a second. But was it yesterday? I think I did an IG live on a different account on a esthetician's page talking about eye health to lash artists.
Lashes, yeah.
So education goes well beyond just talking to people in your own industry, by the way. So just look for opportunities in different ways to build your brand and to have that kind of consistent theme in if other places. Now, when it comes to doing things offline and in the community, again, that's been something that I've been passionate about from day one. And so that was my take on it, is like, how do I make my profession look better? And how do I help people who need the help? So I looked into organizations years ago, like One Site, for example, and I had the opportunity because One Site used to be a subsidiary or like a sister company, or however you want to phrase it, of Luxottica, who owns LensCrafters. And so that was years ago now, first sort of experience going out and volunteering. And I went to South America, and that blew my mind. I was so moved by that I just kept wanting to look for it. And when you start to kind of put that energy out there, when you start to think about that kind of thing more consistently, it's funny how things just sort of come to you eventually. And, talking about engaging and networking with people, I'm part of a couple of different random networking groups and like business groups and that kind of thing. And I happened to be at a golf tournament, and somebody I'd never met before came up to me and said, "Hey, you're the optometrist, right? You talked about something at one of the other meetings." I was like, "Yeah." He goes, he's in finance. He has zero experience in the optical world, eye care world. And he goes, "I had a mini epiphany, and I want to help, and I want to create an organization to help people in need. And I thought eye care would be the place to do it for some reason." And he goes, "I just thought of you because you did the talk recently. And so I thought I'd ask you if you'd want to be part of this." It was just the most random thing. And that's how the eyeglasses project started. Now almost, I think a couple of years ago is when the original idea came around, and that his name is Howard. Howard is the founder of the eyeglasses project, the director or CEO or whatever the term is. So then when I came on board, I kind of originally had sort of the title of being the clinical director. So since I had the experience in One Site clinic, I kind of knew what the flow was, and we tested it out on a small clinic. We only saw 20 or 30 people in a sort of a halfway house sort of thing, people recovering from mental illness or addiction, that kind of thing. And it went really well. It was perfect. So we've been growing from there and trying to do more and more clinics. And we're adding to the team. Every time we do a clinic, there's more ODs, there's more kind of volunteers involved. The biggest one we did was the Christmas one. We haven't had a chance to do one since. And we saw like 100 people in the downtown east side of Vancouver. If you're familiar, that's sort of it's a difficult part of town. And so we were able to help a lot of people there for sure. So it was very cool. Now, if people want to get involved, I wouldn't recommend just sit there and will it to happen. But that might help a little bit if you do align, if you truly feel like this is the type of thing you want to do. Sometimes opportunities will just come to you, but look for organizations in your area that might already be doing stuff like this. I have heard a lot of people referencing the Lions Club. I've personally never been part of the Lions Club, but I would recommend reaching out to the Lions Club because they're a big organization and they do a lot of this kind of stuff, and see if you can help them arrange an eye clinic. And if anybody has any questions about how to set up a clinic like that, we called up, again, cold calling people. I called up equipment companies to see if they will lend us equipment. I called up multiple people. Like when you start to go through the flow of it, you're like, "Oh, we need this and we need these supplies." You just call up people and say, "Will you be able to donate something or lend us something for this event?" And slowly things will kind of come together. But I'm happy to talk to anybody who has any questions about how to set up like the flow of a clinic, or what other little like knickknacks and things you need. Because you the first couple times you do it, you show up and you're like, "Oh, I need a Snellen chart. How am I going to check somebody's vision?" Right? So I ran home and I printed it.
The first step. I don't have it.
Yeah. And I was like, I can't check people's VAs, like simple things like that, right? And it got to a point now. The last time we did one, we had a couple of like phoropters set up on a little stand, so it was way easier to do refractions, all this kind of stuff. So
do you see the eyeglasses project expanding outside of Vancouver? What are the future plans for that project?
Yeah, that's the goal, is to continue to expand. Right now we're just doing things within the city of Vancouver, but the next step is to start to do projects in suburbs outside of Vancouver. And we're starting to look into partnering with other organizations that are helping in different ways in different cities. So there's a really cool organization here called Backpack Buddies, I think it is. And they help a lot of kids. They provide lunch 5 days a week for kids who families are low income and can't afford it. And so they have a reach that goes beyond the city of Vancouver. So we're looking to kind of work with them and see what resources we can find. Ultimately, I know Howard's vision is for this to go nationwide. So we want to see if we're able to make that happen.
Yeah, that would be awesome.
So how are you and your clinic handling COVID-19 right now?
We are closed right now as
Yeah.
far as actually seeing patients in person.
Mm-hmm.
We are doing some telemedicine. You know, I already knew this from before, and you guys maybe already have realized this, but you can diagnose quite a lot just from a patient history.
Yeah.
Right? It's pretty impressive. It's kind of cool to see, but obviously there's lots of things that you can't treat if you're not there in person. So we're triaging a lot. So we're sending people to the appropriate offices if they're open, and ultimately if they have to go to ER or something. We have one staff member who goes into the office every day just by herself and handles contact lens orders and answers just other random questions that people have. We're still doing lots of contact lens orders.
Mm-hmm.
For our private practice. We're trying to look into other online options. Like there are platforms available to eye care professionals to retail eye drops, to retail supplements like omegas and things like that. So we're looking into getting a few of those things on the go as well.
Are you starting to bill for your telehealth, your triage phone calls, or any telehealth services that you're providing?
Right now, technically, we have not, although starting April 1st, we our provincial services, we call MSP, had officially recognized a code that we could bill.
Mm-hmm.
So there's two codes. One is the original visit or consultation, and then there's one code for follow-up visit. So now we're able to. We're not doing that because one is right now in this scenario, for me, this is just my personal feeling. It's nobody's doing this by choice. Nobody's calling me for an appointment because they want to. It's because they have to.
Mm-hmm.
If we continue to implement, and I think we will, telemedicine later, and somebody decides to call instead of come in, I will charge them a copay, but not right now. And the other thing is that complicates it is these insurance companies, it's nice that they say, oh, we will accept billings for these visits. The trouble is I can bill them for $20, $30 or $50 for a phone consult, but then you won't be able to bill them for a full eye exam in 6 months or 8 months from now. So that's kind of like not beneficial to me or the patient. So we're just holding off right now. We're just waiting to see how things kind of fall, and we can go back and bill those visits if we want to MSP.
Yeah.
It's like going back to your seminar. Was it Adam or Daryl that said that like after this whole COVID-19 thing, like people are so used to the telemedicine that they're gonna be like hesitant to come to your clinic after like, well, you just diagnosed me over the phone like a month ago. Why do I have to come now?
Yeah.
So
It's interesting to think that optometry is definitely going to probably implement a lot more telehealth than we ever expected because of this. Yeah.
It makes sense for seniors who can't come to you. Like I think that's a great option for them.
Yeah.
You know, if they don't need to come to your office, then you can just kind of diagnose them over the phone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There are multiple benefits. There's the risk of some, the downside is the potential misdiagnosis, but I would love to keep it. It would help me keep my book a lot more open for other patients that, one, who need to be seen more in person, and two, we can make more money that way if we have more full eye exams coming in the office and I can just see partials or do partials over the phone. There's benefits there on both sides.
Yeah.
And going back to Adam, man, I loved having Adam and Daryl as well. The whole team. I loved having all four of them on there. But
it was a good chat.
Adam's very outspoken for sure. Actually, I just I was editing that video and I was trying to export it and so I could put it up on YouTube today, but it was having some glitches. But the little clip, I always put a little clip in the beginning as like a little teaser, and that's the exact clip I put on there. He said, your experience in the office better be so good that they want to put on pants. You better be so good that they are willing to put on pants and come into your office. I love that. Was so good.
Yeah. It was a good chat. I feel like I am Dr. Ramsey. I'm very opinionated too.
That's awesome.
You can tell on our podcast. I think I pretty much say anything I feel, and that's the truth. That's my truth. That's it.
Hey, it's your podcast. You can say whatever you want.
Yeah.
One more question that I just thought of that I forgot to ask when you're talking about like networking and everything like that. So I feel like a lot of new grads and students feel like there's an art to networking. Like if you don't have the gift of gab, you don't really know how to approach people and how to start talking to them. So say if you're like at an event and you don't know anyone, how do you approach the person that you want to talk to kind of start networking, but you don't want to come off awkward and weird?
If you're at an actual networking event, then I think people will expect people to just kind of It's hard. I'll be honest with you. I never used to be comfortable with it. It's something that's come over time, and it only comes with experience for me anyways. There are some people, like you said, who have the gift of the gab and are just comfortable going out there. And I have friends like that, and I look at them, I'm like, man, I wish I was like you. And I would just suggest to anybody, you do have to push your comfort zone for sure. If it's not already comfortable for you to do it, I wish I could give you simpler advice than that, but start small. Walk up to somebody that maybe you do know a little bit, or you might have some kind of connection with, and be like, hey, I think I know you from this thing, like, and compliment the other person. That always gets them engaged. But then providing value. And so however that is, like, I'm an optometrist. Have you had an eye exam recently? Like, let me help you out with that. Or where'd you get those glasses? Those are really nice. Like, I could help you next time if you're looking for a pair, anything, like random stuff, but just providing value, and be comfortable with a little bit of rejection. Not like flat out, like, no, I'm not going to talk to you. But like when you think you're pushing, or you're being a little bit vulnerable, and you're like maybe asking for something, not everybody's going to either recognize your request or fulfill your request. And you have to be comfortable with that happening. And it stings a little bit. Even for me today, like, I'll email people still, like, all these things I'm telling you guys, I promise you I'm practicing it daily. I email people out of the blue. I call people out of the blue. They never call me back. They deny my request. It's part of the deal, right?
Yeah. I think that's a big life lesson that I learned too. I think what my family would teach me, that, don't be nervous when you're asking someone a question, because you already know that no is one of the answers. So you're already expecting it. That doesn't need to let you down. You've already expected a no, and if it's happened, it's happened. And then try the next time. I did want to ask a quick question for, most of our listeners are likely students right now. And I feel like if I was a student right now and you were giving this advice, I would think, how can I give value to a conversation? Versus if I'm an optometrist, then yes, I'm practicing, I can offer all these things. As a student though, I don't know how I can approach someone and offer value to the conversation who is an optometrist.
That's a very good point. Now, the other thing is like the context of the conversation, right? If I'm an optometrist and a student approaches me, the way I look at that is going to be very different than if another optometrist or some other business person is approaching me. Like, okay, I'll speak from my personal experience. I am very open to students reaching out and just asking me stuff. I think when you're in that position, it's okay. Then it's okay to maybe you don't lead with the provide the value, but you lead with the vulnerability of, I'm a student. I would love to, I'd love to get your advice on some things. A lot of people, I'm speaking for myself, but I think a lot of people fall into this. People like myself are we want to help. And I found this, again, if I don't feel like I have a value to provide in a certain scenario, even today, I will lead with just being a little more vulnerable and being like, look, I'm completely lost in this. I'm starting from scratch. If you have the time, I would love to ask you some questions. I'd love to learn from you. And people who are in that position, the higher position in that scenario, are usually, if they're a good person, willing to help and to talk and at least have somewhat of a discussion. So I wouldn't worry too much in that scenario, but lead with being genuine and vulnerable and open, that you want to learn. And I like to see conscientious people take initiative.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for, spending a full hour with us. I mean, we learned so much today, and hopefully our listeners learned a lot more than what they already know about you.
Thank you guys. I really appreciate the conversation. You guys asked really great questions. I really hope that you guys and your listeners do find some value in my rambling. I tend to go on tangents. One of the ODs that I look up to, actually, I did an interview with him recently, Dr. Trevor Miranda. You guys might know him. He told me before we did that interview, he was like, just be yourself no matter what. Just be totally you. And I was like, but I go on tangents and I make dad jokes and I'm like corny. He's like, just do it. Just own it. I was like, cool.
That's your brand, dad joke.
That's my brand. And you know what? I'm so much more comfortable when I'm not trying to pretend to be like more sophisticated.
I have to, before you leave, I have a dad joke for you, which I just heard this morning.
Perfect.
So what did a buffalo say to his son before leaving for work?
What did a buffalo say to his son
Before leaving for work? Bye, son.
Oh my God. Okay, we're gonna edit
So
that out.
good.
We will edit that
So
out.
good.
That was just-
The second
was
we
just
get off
for
this
Harbir.
call, I'm gonna message that into like multiple WhatsApp groups right now. That's awesome.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming on to Four Eyes. We appreciate it so much. You have a big impact on how we are approaching the optometry community as well. So we definitely look up to you and are absorbing everything that you're teaching on all your platforms. So
Thank you.
Thanks.
That's very kind. That's very flattering and humbling. Thank you very much.
Thanks everyone for listening to Four Eyes. You can find Dr. Harbir Sian on Instagram at harbirsian.od and on YouTube by searching Dr. Harbir Sian. His 2020 podcast is also available on multiple podcasting platforms, so be sure to listen. And make sure to subscribe and follow us as well on Instagram at 4EyesOptom. Look out for new episodes every Wednesday, and until then, stay tuned.